Right, so my name is Irfaan Ahmed. I'm the Health and Safety Product Manager here at the Durban branch for Labournet. So I manage a team of 4 consultants at the moment and service clients across the whole of KZN.
The OHS Act, what exactly is that?
So the Occupational Health and Safety Act is a piece of legislation that's really there to give guidance and, in terms of how employers can create a safe and healthy working environment for all of their staff. Not only their staff, in fact, but also any other person that might be affected by the operations of that business.
Okay, and then the minimal requirements?
So minimum requirements for occupational health and safety, that's probably one of the most frequently asked questions that we get from companies that call in looking for guidance on complying. And minimum compliance is, something that we can achieve relatively easily. I think if you look at companies in South Africa, a lot of the companies that call Labournet, for example, they have never really taken the journey to comply on health and safety legislation. So minimum compliance is always a good starting point for them. It's something that they can build upon over time. And, it's obviously just allows them to establish a very basic health and safety management system. So what I usually recommend for companies that do call in looking for guidance on this is to invite us to their company, allow us to come in and conduct a complimentary health and safety compliance risk assessment, where we'll come in, get to understand the business a bit better, really understand the details around how the business operates. And from that assessment, we'll be able to confirm and verify exactly what their legal requirements are. From there, we'll be able to tailor-make a service for them, where Labournet will be able to come in and, depending on their needs and expectations, provide them with a level of support to get them to minimum legal compliance.
All right, so now that dreaded question, the Department of Labour has issued a notice.
Sure.
They come and do an inspection. What's the process?
Yeah, look, when it comes to the Department of Labour in South Africa, I think there's this misperception on the department as a whole. I think a lot of companies out there fear the department for some reason. However, the inspections should be welcomed and they should be expected at the end of the day. So what I advise companies when it comes to the Department of Labour inspections is that we should be as proactive as possible. We need to understand that they're coming in to really just take a snapshot of compliance. It's not a very detailed assessment. So make sure that you have the necessary things in place, deal with it as proactively as possible so that when the department comes in, we have peace of mind knowing that everything is there. The department is there to assist employers, like I mentioned earlier. So in my entire time in health and safety, which is roughly 15 years now, I can't remember in the last 15 years the Department of Labour closing down a company that I was either working with directly or consulting with at Labournet. So usually what they do is, if there are areas of non-compliance, they make recommendations on how we can comply, and they support us to ensure that we do. Right, so I think that's a big thing, is to change that perception of the department and actually welcome them to the workplace to ensure that they can come in and assist us to comply.
All right, great. And now that all-important question, you're at work, injury happens while you're on duty, what do you do?
Sure. So look, everything that we do in relation to health and safety, complying with the legislation, working towards best practice in health and safety, ultimately all boils down to one thing, and that's protecting people. Either the people that are working for the company on a day-to-day basis or anybody else that might be affected by the business operations like I mentioned earlier. So naturally, an IOD, injury on duty, is a major red flag for us. It tells us that there is something that is deficient in our health and safety management system, and also it identifies that there's an opportunity for us to improve. So when there is an IOD, it's important to mention that there's 2 separate pieces of legislation that come into play. There's the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and there's the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. Both pieces of legislation require us to take different steps in order to comply. So under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there's a couple of key things that we need to do. Number one, after the injury has taken place, we need to make sure that we investigate that IOD to really identify what is the root cause that resulted in this person injuring themselves. Once we've identified the root cause, we are now in a position to put some sort of corrective actions in place to prevent a recurrence. The other thing that is important that we need to do under the OHS Act and regulations is that we also need to report certain incidents to the Department of Labour. Right, so that's obviously the OHS Act and regulations. When we look at the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, under that specific act, we need to now process a compensation fund claim. So as an employer, we have 7 days after the incident has taken place to ensure that we've reported that matter to the compensation fund. Once that has been done, the company protects themselves from legal liability in relation to the expenses for the medical aid. Right, so thereafter, medical treatment facilities and providers that treat the individual will claim their expenses directly from the fund. So the matter can be a little bit complicated depending on the scenario that resulted in the IOD. So we usually recommend to companies that call us once an IOD has taken place. Let us understand all of the details regarding that, and we'll then be in a position to advise you accordingly.
It was a very simple question with a very, very long answer.
Thanks.
But obviously more in depth than I thought it was. Eh? So we've covered all the questions. In a nutshell, Labournet and yourself, how would you sum it up, what you do?
So in a nutshell, we tailor-make health and safety services for our clients depending on their needs and expectations. A lot of companies in South Africa have never taken the journey on health and safety compliance, like I mentioned earlier, and that's for various reasons. I mean, I think one of the key reasons is that smaller organizations can't afford to go out and hire health and safety professionals, so they lack the internal skills and expertise to comply. So that's where we come in. You know, our services are affordable for smaller organizations. It's really easy for the companies to digest in the sense that we can actually upskill their people. We can transfer skills to their internal team so that over the long term, they understand exactly how the service or how the compliance requirements are implemented and how they can maintain compliance over the long term.